I had a Jane Jacobs moment coming here because I was in the subway looking over my notes, and then I heard a growl at the end of the subway car. And I looked up and I saw, in no particular order, a skeleton, a devil, a butterfly, a leopard, a fairy princess, and then finally a gorilla whose head was sort of touch scraping the top of the subway. And I realized, Jane Jacobs is density compresses space. You can see the whites of their eyes, and Halloween in New York is better. I'd like to introduce our panelists. Christopher Klemek is assistant professor of history at George Washington University, and he's co-curated the current Jane Jacobs exhibition. Julia Vitullo-Martin is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and director of the Center for Rethinking Development. Sandy Zipp is an assistant professor at Brown University. He is an urban and cultural historian. And then Roberta Brandes Gratz is an award-winning journalist and urban critic, lecturer, and author.
Can one woman make a difference, still make a difference, as it's put? And to me, that's a question that is a slight variation on, what difference did Jane Jacobs make? She's something of a lightning rod. Everybody has an opinion on Jane Jacobs these days, and she's something, I think, of a touchstone for debates really that go beyond Jacobs herself, that seem often to have to do with the future of New York or the future of cities. And although the media, and in some ways I think there will be a temptation even tonight for us to ask the question, what would Jane Jacobs think, or what would Jane Jacobs do faced with this current proposal or these developments in New York? And I think I think ultimately that's not even an answerable question. It really comes down to what you would do and what you think and what your observations really add up to it. And that, to some extent, I think is the heart of the model and the message that she laid out for us.
I realize that I think the most important thing that she had to say was her respect for two concepts, one density and the other complexity. And she believed those two things had to be together. And that's where I think much of the misinterpretation comes from. She disliked very much self-isolating projects. So she disapproved equally of self-isolating large developments like public housing for low-income people and luxurious towers for high-income people. I think if Jacobs were looking at New York today, she would regard the most serious self-isolating projects as the projects that are being developed by large, powerful nonprofit institutions.
I'd like to see her as an emblem of a particular time. And that time is, of course, the much celebrated or much maligned, depending on your perspective, cultural era that we call the 60s. Now, Jacobs isn't often included in media or even historical accounts of that time, but she belongs there just the same, I think. I think she embodies or has given us a set of paradoxes and that really give us a refreshing and new perspective on that mixed and confusing time and on its legacy for our own times.
Jane's ideas are most intimately connected to Greenwich Village. The downside of this is twofold. First, people tend to visualize only the village when Jane was simply using that particular place to illustrate general principles. Second, people tend to judge today's village against her use of it almost 50 years ago. Jane was the first one to recognize the changes in today's village. For the most part, she liked them. The village, as gentrified as people may think, is as dense, diversified, quintessentially urban today as it was in Jane's day. What is wrong with the village today is wrong with the whole city, and in fact, the country. The squeezing out of the working class and the rising costs of housing and other essentials are a fact of American life, not just village life. Jane's ideas are not frozen in time. She never expected change not to occur. The process of change is what concerned her most, how it was managed and how intimately involved in shaping that change were the citizens affected by that change.
You know, she had this ability to go in front of public meetings and to rally groups with a tremendously incisive and inspirational sort of public speaking style, as well as the mind. I mean, what people who knew her will always say is that, you know, her brilliance and her intensity would come across just immediately. And this is something that she could use to sort of run circles around officials at public hearings and so forth. But the other thing that you notice about her, at least when I met her, she's very giggly. She's just always sort of this giggly, bubbly little old lady that I met. But yet also, you know, hard as nails, tough, sort of almost, you know, willing to go head to head in the old trenches of sort of New York City politics.
Julia, when we spoke earlier today, we touched lightly on the issue of whether Jane was a proto-feminist and whether it's actually even relevant to her body of thought.
I actually don't think she was truly a proto-feminist. When Death and Life came out, we were all tremendously impressed with this book and we're so excited about it. And our professors would put it down by saying, oh, you're talking about the book by that girl from New York. And nobody would say that today. I guess that's a sign of some progress. But for years at Chicago, we knew they were talking about Jane Jacobs because she was the girl.
Well, look at Mumford's review of her Death and Life. The title was Mother Jacobs' Home Remedies.
Given how much society has changed, is there still some importance to her ideas for us today? And I think there is. Yes, it's true that the factors that contributed to life on the street in her day are very much changed by the change in family life. But I think the basic principle of the importance of a lively street has not changed.
Can you place her in a larger historic context?
Jacobs arrived at the right place and at the right time as the right kind of person. But she didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, in my sense from the research that I've done about the kind of precursors to Jacobs, the world before Jacobs in combating urban renewal, is that there was a pretty active, although not well-known, movement to try to stop urban renewal and big building projects of the kind you've described throughout New York City and throughout other parts of the country before Jane Jacobs arrived and wrote her book. And her book comes out, and because of her great personality and this wonderful way that we've just heard about, she was able to really, I think, catalyze all these forces and push them forward.
Thank you. And the next panel discussion of this series will occur on Tuesday, November 6th at 6:30 at Rockefeller University. And that session will be when the big get bigger in New York's universities and their neighborhoods. Thank you for coming.